All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the fascinating and honestly pretty complex historical origins of a deity known all across India. Whether you happen to call him Kartikeya, Skanda, Subramanya, or Murugan, his story is deep, really deep. We're going to decode the mystery of his birth, and we're not just going to use ancient myths to do it. We're looking at hard, cold archaeological evidence.
Born in the north, forged in the heartland, worshipped in the south. Now, you might have seen this exact movie poster tagline for an upcoming JR/NTR film. It recently sparked a roaring cultural debate online. It's a super bold claim, and it immediately made us ask the big question: where was this deity actually born? So, let's unpack this modern clash, right? Impartially. Down in Tamil Nadu, Murugan is fiercely celebrated as Tamil Kadavul, the god of the Tamils, and he is deeply, deeply tied to native, ancient Dravidian roots. So for a lot of people, claiming he was born in the north felt like a massive historical distortion. But on the flip side, the northern defense points straight to ancient Sanskrit Puranic texts that explicitly map his cosmic birth to Himalayan geography. To really understand this debate, we have to look at exactly how regional Tamil cultural pride intersects with pan-Indian mythology.
Section 1. Myth versus archaeological reality. Okay, before we dig into the literal dirt of history, let's briefly examine the cosmic birth story that fuels that northern scriptural defense. According to texts like the Skanda Purana, the gods desperately needed a warrior. So, 6 incredibly powerful, fiery sparks were emitted from Lord Shiva's third eye. Carried by the fire god Agni and the wind god Vayu, these divine sparks were eventually deposited into the secluded, cool waters of a Himalayan reed forest called Saravanaka Poigai. The story goes that upon touching the water, these sparks transformed into 6 infants, who were then nursed by star nymphs. The text tells us that when goddess Parvati saw them, she was totally overcome with maternal love. She gathered all 6 babies into a single loving embrace, completely fusing them into Shanmuka, or Arumugam, the spectacular 6-faced lord with 12 arms. I mean, it is just a beautiful, incredibly powerful origin story. Section 2. Iron Age, South Indian roots. But hey, what happens when we step away from cosmic lakes and actually look for physical, tangible proof? Our historical detective story actually starts down in ancient South India, tracing the physical artifacts of a proto-Tamil deity over several centuries, going all the way back to 500 BCE. The absolute archaeological smoking gun here is found at a prehistoric burial site in Tamil Nadu called Adichanallur. Picture this. Inside ancient burial urns dating back to roughly 500 BCE, archaeologists excavated ancient iron spears, or Vels, right alongside bronze roosters. Since the Vel and the rooster are the definitive undisputed symbols of Murugan, this gives us hard physical proof that a proto-Murugan cult existed in the deep south during the Iron Age. And you know what's crazy? This physical evidence lines up perfectly with early literature. The oldest Tamil Sangam grammar text, the Tolkappiyam, explicitly mentions Seon, the Red One. He was the guardian deity of the Kurinji, which were the mountainous and hilly ecosystems, and he was worshipped natively by early indigenous hunter tribes. Later on, at Salavankuppam near Mahabalipuram, archaeologists found a brick temple dating to the Sangam period that features a physical stone Vel sitting on a brick platform. This firmly establishes his deep native roots in the south.
Section 3. The Gandharan warrior god.
So, while the south was worshipping Seon, centuries later, ancient northwestern empires were busy minting the history of a great warrior god of their own. We're talking about the Kushan Empire and the Yaudea Republic right around the 1st century BCE to the 2nd century CE. They literally stamped ancient coins with this deity's image. We see names written in ancient scripts like Skanda, Kumara, and Vishraka. And he's depicted as this heavily armored general, sometimes with 1 head, sometimes with 6, holding a spear. The geographical spread of this is just staggering. If you look at artifacts from ancient Gandhara, which is modern-day Afghanistan, archaeologists have unearthed stone statues depicting this warrior god, Skanda. He is wearing heavy Scythian military coats and boots, and he is prominently holding a rooster, literally the exact same symbol we saw in those 500 BC South Indian burial urns.
Section 4. Decoding the animal's symbols. This is where it gets super interesting. We can actually use his animal companions as literal geographical breadcrumbs to track his cultural evolution. Because this iconography doesn't just happen by accident. Let's decode how the rooster, the peacock, and the snake map out the brilliant blending of distinct regional traditions over hundreds of years. First up, we have the rooster, or kukuta. Now, we already know bronze roosters were in those South Indian Iron Age burials, right? Well, centuries later, the rooster becomes the earliest definitive signature of the northern warrior god, too. It appears heavily on those ancient Afghan statues and Kushan coins. In early Vedic and North Indian martial traditions, the rooster was an ancient symbol of the dawn, of alertness, and the onset of battle. Basically, the perfect companion for a standing general. Next, let's look at the peacock, or mayura. This bird basically represents the geographic transition. The peacock, as his primary vehicle, actually becomes standard a bit later, during the Central Indian Gupta Empire, around the 4th to 6th century CE. But what's totally amazing is how seamlessly this merged with the southern tradition. The peacock was already natively associated with those mountainous Tamil Nadu landscapes we talked about earlier, where wild peacocks thrived. It was literally the perfect symbol to bridge the north and the south. And finally, this snake. This one perfectly illustrates the cultural merger we're talking about. Up in the northern Gandharan and Gupta traditions, the snake is often depicted being held in the peacock's beak. It's a classic motif of the celestial bird conquering the earthly serpent. But as the deity merges with South Indian tradition, he becomes deeply intertwined with native Naga worship. The snake completely shifts from a conquered enemy into a deeply revered native protector.
Section 5. A Pan-Indian Convergence.
So looping all the way back to that controversial movie poster tagline, what is the actual historical verdict? Well, the academic evidence points to an incredible journey, but actually in the exact opposite direction. His oldest symbols, the spear and the rooster, first pop up in Iron Age South India around 500 BC. Those exact symbols then spread northwards, appearing centuries later in the Kushan and Gandharan empires, where he was forged into the armored state warrior Skanda. Finally, during the Gupta Empire, these traditions folded back on themselves, completely merging the northern warrior with the ancient Tamil hunter god into one beautifully unified pan-Indian deity. When you look past all the internet outrage and actually examine the hard archaeological evidence, you get this amazing story of cultural blending, not division. The oldest roots of the South traveled north, only to return and create a shared pan-Indian icon. So I'll leave you with this. How does seeing the beautifully blended, complex truth of our past change how we fiercely guard our modern cultural identities today? Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer. Stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next one.